Hey there. When it comes to purely local media, there's actually not a huge amount of options available out there anymore in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You have a lot of community radio stations that have a network around the country. You also have very, very few local newspapers and media sites that continue that sort of tradition. Most of our local media is actually based around something like NZME or Stuff, and they produce local content that doesn't really hit the big time, doesn't make it onto national news. And that was a real problem with this year's local body election because there just wasn't a huge amount of coverage for a lot of these problematic candidates. But in Waipa District Council, things were a little bit different, mostly in part because of the local media coverage that they had there. Marianne Gill, who is co-editor of the Te Awamutu News and the Cambridge News, sat down with me just before the election to talk about how important local media actually is to this process and how it can influence people's decision making when it comes to who they choose to vote from, all the way from information that's withheld at council because council feels it needs to be withheld for some reason, through to analysing the imagery and photos that are used for people's voting booklets. It's a fascinating conversation, and I thoroughly recommend, if you don't already, follow Marianne on Twitter, check out the Te Awamutu News on Facebook, and if you live in the area, make sure you give them a read. It's great to have local media there on hand. Now, this episode was actually recorded just before the election, so there might be some slightly inaccurate predictions, but overall, it's a fantastic chance to sit down and learn more about truly local media and something that we seem to be missing a lot of now in this country, and that's that really local focus to make sure that people are informed with what's going on and the decisions that affect their everyday lives. Enjoy.
Yeah, hi, my name is Marianne Gill. I work at the Cambridge News and the Te Awamutu News. I'm a veteran reporter of 40 plus years. I just live and breathe community news journalism and local body elections. I just love them with a passion.
Perfect. What have been your impressions of this campaign?
The Waipa campaign's been very interesting because for the first time in 6 years, we've actually had somebody else standing for mayor. So the last election, Jim Milcrest got in, nobody stood against him. And I actually think that's pretty unhealthy. I think if we've got a system where you put to the test every 3 years, then you should be put to the test every 3 years. But anyway, so we've got four people standing for mayor here in Waipa, three with very good chances. It's almost impossible to pick. And so I'm not going to pick because I think I just really can't pick it myself. So we've got Jim Milcrest standing again. He's in his 60s. He's had a couple of health issues. A lot of people will think he's potentially tired, been around too long, 9 years. He's been anti Three Waters, anti just about everything the government's done. So his messaging has been very much negative. He hasn't really come out with anything that I would call positive. We've got Susan O'Regan, who's been on council for 6 years. The last 3 years, she's chaired the powerful Strategic Policy Committee, and she chaired the long-term plan hearings last year very impressively. She's a barrister by profession. She studied politics at university. She's the daughter of Catherine O'Regan, who was a National Party MP for many years. Catherine O'Regan herself stood unsuccessfully for mayor many years ago. Very much a well-known Waipa family. So Susan's run a very interesting campaign as well. She's very measured in her thinking. She's got some really good positive stuff she's going down. Her big thing has been the lack of communication by Waipa Council. So one of the things she'll do is attempt to sort that out if she gets in. We've got Bernard Westerman from Te Awamutu, and I don't think Bernard would mind too much if I said he's got little or no chance of becoming mayor. So if I've ignored him, my apologies, but I don't think it's going to make any difference. And then the other sort of dark horse, really, and nobody knew him when he put his name forward. So it's a Cambridge businessman. Chris Woodhams is his name. And when his name came up, everybody said, "Who's Chris Woodhams?" Well, we've all found out who Chris Woodhams is because he's come out all guns blasting. So the first time I met him, it was to do the story about announcing that he was standing for mayor, and his line right from the word go was, let's build a bridge. Too bad what it costs. Let's just build a bridge. We need another bridge across the Waikato River because we've got far too many cars in Cambridge and there's too many roadblocks. And Chris has come out with quite a lot of other election stuff. He's locally born and bred, has been away working in Europe for many years and has come back. He's got ties with Parongia, Te Awamutu. He's the candidate who's really gotten out and about. So we covered a mayoral election at Lauriston Retirement Village a couple of weeks ago. And Chris stood up and said he's going to be an evangelist for Waipa, which is good to know, isn't it? He was very interesting. So, he's had no experience of local body politics, none at all. He said, what's so different about it? He runs a business, so what's so different about running a multi-million-dollar council? And that's where he's coming from. He seems to have garnered quite a lot of support from the people, what I call the Third Bridge Brigade. So really, really tough to pick. Two sort of Te Awamutu candidates, really. Although Susan lives halfway between Cambridge and Te Awamutu, she's very much seen as a Te Awamutu girl. Jim obviously is, steeped in Te Awamutu, part of what we've called in the past the Old Boys Network, and I'm sure you're aware of the Old Boys Network in Te Awamutu, Paul?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
So Jim's very much part of that, and then Chris is Cambridge. So, there's been, at this stage, with returns at about 25%, there's been about 1,000 more people voted in Cambridge at this stage. So, ergo, you'd have to say maybe the Cambridge guys got more show than the other. But who's to know? The first woman, I don't know. It's up in the air.
It's a tricky one. I was wondering about Susan's relationship to Catherine. Actually, I hadn't looked into it, but the name sort of did pique my interest because of those links. Catherine's been around for years.
She really knows her politics. She actually has worked in the Beehive. I think that there are a few people in the National Party have had her earmarked for potentially being a National Party candidate. She's a very, very capable woman, very capable. And if she became mayor, she'd be fine. She'd be great. Chris Woodhams would bring a new broom in. Some people have compared him to a sort of Donald Trump-like figure. I wouldn't dare do that, but I have been at a meeting where he was compared to a Donald Trump figure. So,
that sort of populist politics.
Very much so. Let's build a bridge, build a wall, build a fence,
building a bridge is a lot better than building a wall.
True.
It's a lot, and he's kind of right. I mean, to be fair, Cambridge has had those two bridges for years, and the old tall one it's not fit for purpose anymore.
No, that's the high level bridge, and it's a historic bridge, and trucks and vans and what have you can't go over it anymore. There's what we call the low level bridge, which is Ferguson Bridge. There's so many issues about, do we need another bridge, or should we be getting out of cars and getting better public transport? So we're not well served by public transport in the same way Hamilton is. We have the regional bus service, and there's eight buses a day go to and from Hamilton, and that's pretty much it, really. Very good cycling network here. I've taken up cycling late in life, and I love it. But most people travel around in cars.
And I suppose if you're doing public transport as well in Waipa, because you have your two main centres, it must be a very difficult thing to coordinate. Of course, most of that comes down to regional council anyway, and what they would put in place.
Although you can get funding, the district council can add value, and what's been asked for in Cambridge in particular is is a smaller sort of a bus system. I think they've launched it now in Hamilton and Rototuna, where it's a bus on demand. Is
Yep,
that
I
what
know the one. Yep.
you know the one? And so that's kind of what they're looking for, so that people can from Leamington can nip into Cambridge, and people from the northern suburbs of Cambridge, which is, if you haven't been to Cambridge for 5-6 years, you won't recognise the place.
I'm down there
So
quite
that
regularly,
people,
actually. My kids are down there.
oh really?
Yeah.
So that's but there is no public transport between Cambridge and Te Awamutu. But I'm not sure that it would be that well supported anyway, because I don't know that many people who go from Cambridge to Te Awamutu on a daily basis.
No, they're kind of self-sustaining, really. Everyone will go to Hamilton, but there's not really much that you need from one or the other that you don't get already in Cambridge and Te Awamutu.
And that's half the problem, Paul, because while Cambridge and Te Awamutu are part of a district called Waipa, Cambridge and Te Awamutu themselves have not got an awful lot in common.
No. Although, to be fair, it's probably going to get worse next year when they redraw the lines.
True. In Te Awamutu, look, I love Te Awamutu. It's got I work there 2 days a week. It's got a real good buzz about it. I tell you what, that main street is always chocker.
Yeah.
The shops are doing gangbusters. I've just been interviewing a local company, and they've said, look, post-COVID, we've got people walking in the door wanting to spend money. They're not going on trips. They want to spend money. So, it's a rural service town, and it's doing pretty blimmin' well. They, really good operators. I go into a coffee shop once a week, and without fail, I walk in the door and the latte's waiting for me. They never ask me what I want, which is, and it's just great. So Te Awamutu's got that really great feel about it. But again, I think that's a town very much built on an old boys network.
Yeah.
Now, Cambridge is different. Cambridge is, I don't want to say posher, because that makes us all sound as if we're a bit, upper class. But we've actually had.
I've always found Cambridge to be less rural.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's a lot more cosmopolitan. I think being closer to Hamilton, it certainly pays off quite a bit, and it has a very different feel to it.
I agree. And the other thing that has helped Cambridge in recent years is having the expressway cut off Cambridge. So there was a lot of concern within Cambridge retailers that when the expressway was built and State Highway 1 no longer went through the town, that they would lose a lot of custom. In fact, what's happened is the opposite. The town has been reclaimed by the people who live in the town.
Yeah.
So rather than thinking, oh God, because you used to, if you lived on the northern part of Cambridge and you went into town, you'd have to compete with the State Highway 1 traffic. Mm-hmm. So often you'd think, oh, stuff it, I'm not going to do it. Whereas now it's our town again. And so it's probably as busy, if not busier, than it was before it was State Highway 1. We just don't have all this traffic suddenly going through it. And so I think it's, of course it is a commuter town as well. I mean, there's something like 20,000 cars a day head out of Cambridge towards Hamilton. And, that's just a reality. It's just the way it is. We've also in recent times had a lot of people move down here from Auckland. There's going to be more of that happen now because of the expressway. Look, I've just been on the expressway this morning. I had to go to Te Rapa. That's taken off 15, 20 minutes of my time.
It's such a game changer. Last time I came down, actually, I think it saved me about 45 minutes of travel time until I hit the Hamilton to Cambridge to Tapahiri, because they were still doing the roadworks. So it was just an instant stop, wait in traffic. Yeah. Well, that just seems like a really disappointing way to end an awesome drive.
Absolutely. Look, and the things that my daughter-in-law is a hairdresser in Rototuna, and she and her family, my son and her, are thinking of moving to Cambridge. And she says that she won't need to change jobs. She'll be able to live in Cambridge and get to Rototuna pretty blooming quickly. University students, if they can't find a flat in Hamilton, and I understand that's pretty difficult, Cambridge is now a viable option. So I think what you're going to see in Cambridge is more of that sort of growth, particularly to the north of the town. So we've just had a big announcement that they're going to redevelop the north of the town near the Cambridge Raceway is going to be upgraded, so they're getting a new multi-million-dollar stand. Lots of stuff going on there, and the Hautaipu Rugby Club, all that area which is town belt, is going to be redeveloped as well. So, potentially you could have another rugby stadium there, for example, and Hamilton people could hop on the expressway and they're in Cambridge in 15 minutes. So the two quite different towns, and when they were brought together in 1989, it was an odd marriage, and it continues to be a strange marriage, but it's just going to have to keep happening.
So what would you say are some of the notable moments that have popped up during this campaign for you?
I think the first most notable moment, Roy Pilot, who's the editor, and myself are both pretty old timers as far as politics are concerned, and one of the things we wanted to do was get all the photos of the candidates straight away. We wanted them straight away. We wanted to tell people what was going on. So we went to the returning officer, Warwick Lamp, and we said, and so all the photos had to be in, for example, by Friday, I think it was 4 o'clock or something like that. So we asked for all the photos so we could put them on our front page the following week. And we were told no, that we had to wait until he'd produced the election handbook. And we said, well, hold on a minute, no, we want to put them all on our front page, end of. And it was no, you can't do it. Until we bugged him so much that he released the photos to us and we put it on our front page. Actually, hold on, I'll just grab the paper in question and I'll show you what it looks like. Now I can't find it. Here it is. Okay. You see that all right?
It's cool. It is
so
very
these
cool.
were what we threatened to do was, if he didn't give us the photos, we were just going to run a whole lot of silhouettes. This guy here, this silhouette, Bernie Finn from Te Awamutu, he didn't provide anybody with a photo. So he's even in the election book, he hasn't got a photo.
Which surprises me. I thought they had to. I thought that would be a legal requirement for running, is to put in a photo. There's a lot of candidates who don't.
So. No, you'd think so. So in the end, we did this. We put this on our front page, and these are the photos that the candidates themselves provided.
Some of them need practice.
The next week, what we did was we went to a professional photographer and asked him to judge the photos.
Mm-hmm.
And, he couldn't believe it. I don't know if you know Stephen Barker, who does a lot of professional type photography. Yep. And he judged the photos for us, and he said, one of the things that astonished him was that people didn't spend the money. So getting a good professional photo taken is like $150, $160 or something like that. And so he couldn't believe it. I mean, like, there's one there, for example, this person's just taken a selfie, or it's from Instagram and put a filter on it. This guy here's got a Hawaiian shirt on. This is, the background and what have you. I mean, really, so many candidates and they just blew it, really.
Yeah.
And then these are the photos that go, forgive my tics.
That's right. This will be after the election's closed. This isn't counted as endorsing a candidate at this point.
So these are the photos that went in the election handbook. And, I think that 99.9% of people who voted have probably done it by going through the photos, and this person looks good and that person looks good. And so I did a test. I've got 18-year-old twin granddaughters who have both voted for the first time, one in Hamilton, and the other one's down in Dunedin at university down there. She voted for somebody called Slime.
Yes, Slime is running for the regional council because Slime wants to make sure that the artificial fertilizer company that they've got based down there is still able to continue producing slime.
Right. Well, Slime went to the campus and has been the only candidate apparently that's gone to the university campus. So it'll be interesting to see if Slime gets in.
Yeah.
But my granddaughter voted for him, her, isn't it?
It. I would imagine Slime is an it.
Okay. Well, my granddaughter voted for it, and I'm not sure who else she voted for, but I showed them this front page and I said to them, who would you vote for? And they are voting on photos. So they chose who they would vote for. And they said that they wouldn't vote for one particular candidate because it looked like somebody from Voices for Freedom. And they were spot on right.
Would that be Sally Whitaker?
No, she's in Te Awamutu.
Okay.
She's not standing for the council.
Okay.
So look, we have somebody
Delwyn.
here, Delwyn. But
Yep.
look, give Delwyn a due. She's actually been quite upfront about it.
Yeah.
We asked her, "Are you Voices for Freedom?" She said, "Yes, I am. Here's the reason I am." And some of her other policy statements have been perfectly sensible. So I like that sort of candidate. You know what you're getting. She's said what she is and what she does. I take exception to the people who haven't either told us or tried to hide it.
Yeah, and
that's what I take exception to.
Few of those hidden around the country. And for Waipa itself, I believe most of them have been pretty open. Westerbarn is probably the one who's tried to hide it the most, from what I've been able to see.
Well, I think Bernard's hiding behind some other things. Look, the other thing that's been confusing the campaign over here is we've before Ashley left the Ministry of Health, he brought in fluoride.
Yes, and he made everybody do it.
There's been no fluoride in the water in Waipa ever, and the council have never discussed it. And suddenly he brings in fluoride, but only in Cambridge. And so suddenly we've had all these fluoride people come from out of left field as well, which has kind of muddied the waters as well.
Is that because Cambridge comes from a single reservoir?
No, there's two, but it's actually just a money thing, Paul. It's it's 25,000 people. It's going to be cheaper to do it in Cambridge, and it's we kept going back to the Ministry of Health and saying, why Cambridge? Have we got a whole lot of kids wandering around town with teeth decay? We haven't.
Yeah.
We haven't. And look, my background, I'm an absolute. I'm sorry, but I think fluoride is the best thing since sliced toast. I think it's one of the greatest innovations in public health ever. I just don't know why we wouldn't have it. But hey, so even I couldn't get answers, and they know.
Yeah.
I ran the campaign to get fluoride into Hamilton's water. I had anti-fluoride people sending me hate notes, and I was blocking people off my emails and everything.
I got one once when I was at Countdown in Te Rapa, and I used to live in Phuket, and I think something had just been put in the Times that I'd written about how the anti-fluoride brigade was pissing me off, and they were all crazy. This woman stopped me in the car park and screamed at me about murdering her grandchildren.
I know.
It's so extreme. And my kids went to Fairfield Intermediate, and the back entrance to Fairfield Intermediate actually goes right past one of the big anti-fluoride campaigners' homes. I was picking the kids up one day, I had no idea where it was, and sort of meeting them at the back gate, and the woman was having a meeting of anti-fluoride people at the same time, and I pulled up a little bit early, and it's like, "Oh, you're coming into the meeting?" It's like, "Oh, you definitely don't want me in that meeting." I don't think I would survive walking through that door, to be honest. That's just a bunch of craziness to it.
Yeah, and look, when I was running the campaign for the DHB, some of the emails I got were unbelievable. Kane Titchener still blames me. He calls me the woman who single-handedly brought fluoride into Hamilton's water, which is nonsense, of course. But look, I ran the campaign, so you wouldn't get a person more in favour of fluoride, and yet even I couldn't get answers why. And so, even this week we had a column ready to go from a dentist explaining why fluoride should be in Cambridge's water, and we had to pull it because she didn't provide a mugshot. So that's been another thing that's kind of muddied the waters. We've got fluoride suddenly going into the water, so mandates and vaccines and
big scary buzzwords.
And and really that's it's just been a lot of noise, really. So amongst the council, we've had one councillor here who claimed to have found a site for the third bridge and had negotiated the land, and he stood up at a public meeting, allegedly stood up at a public meeting and said that he'd found the land and what have you. And in fact, he hadn't. So he had to then stand up the following week at a public meeting and apologise for confusing things. So, but he will probably get in, no problem at all. So yeah, we've had a lot of fun. We've actually reported things that haven't been reported in community newspapers for many, many years. And today's front page is a classic example. So the council had the results of a residents' survey 2 months ago, which basically said residents think the council's not doing a very good job at all, aren't communicating properly. So the mayor and the current crop of councillors all knew about this survey, but it was only released last week for the first time. It was released an hour after we went to press. Look, if I was cynical, I would say that was done deliberately, but I'm not a cynical person.
Of course not.
It just needed the sign-offs. But you see now what people like Chris Woodhams is saying, and I think quite rightly he's saying, hey, this is not fair. That these councillors knew these results, and I didn't. Surely I should know. And there's a candidate in Pirongia as well, Coralyn Steele, who's standing against the incumbents Claire St Pierre and Bruce Thomas. And it was people in Pirongia who have got the lowest opinion of the council.
Having grown up in Pirongia myself, I completely understand.
So it would have been nice for Coralyn to have known 4 or 5 weeks ago what the residents of Pirongia think of the council, because she could have gone out and campaigned on that. So she's saying, well, hold on a minute, Claire and Bruce knew the results and haven't done anything about it. So, look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I have to say. But I must admit, why would you hang on to, why would you release a residents' survey less than 2 weeks out from an election?
Yeah, it doesn't quite add up.
No.
Yeah.
No. You either release it or you don't.
Yeah.
You're either. So it was available in August. They should have released it in August.
Yeah.
Or not released it until after the election.
See, if they'd released it in August as well, it would have died down before election time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So
those are the sorts of things that have been happening here. The issues are really quite different, as I say, between Te Awamutu. Look, the issue over in Te Awamutu, of course, is what's happening with the memorial park over there. So there's a lot of angst about what's happening there. This is supposedly a memorial to the fallen in the Second World War, but it wasn't just Pākehā who died in the Second World War.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
And and we. There's kind of been some overtones to that debate which make me feel very uncomfortable. And in the same way, there's a lot of opposition to there being the museum in Te Awamutu, which will be looking at part of it will be looking into the land wars. And again, I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up learning a hell of a lot about the land wars. And I wish I had, because
because growing up in Pirongia, you've got the readout there, and that's one of those things that you basically get pointing, and this is the final line for where the empire stopped, and that there was King Country where they were. The thing I found most interesting, when many years ago I did a fundraiser for some film thing, and we found Te Awamutu Museum actually had one of the original costumes from one of the first ever feature films made here, which was Riwi's Last Stand.
Oh, wow.
Which was stored in their sort of chilled deposit area that they had underneath the museum itself. But they had no actual uniforms from the land wars. They only had ones that were made for movies. They had very little in terms of actual land war materials or land war era stuff. I found that quite fascinating. It's a beautiful costume.
I for the first time when I was on the Waikato District Health Board, the inequities in health, and it's just staggering, and it's not until you actually land to me is just land,
Yeah.
but to the Maori, land is far more than just land, and you have to realise that it is a generational thing. And those land wars were wrong.
Yes.
They were inherently wrong. And nobody told me that when I was growing up. I just, was. And look, and I get it that generations later there's still angst about it. I do. But I'm probably in the minority among my age group.
Hopefully we can change that.
I hope so, because it's really important. We just don't need inequities in health, for example, and in other areas costing this country a hell of a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The one that sort of blew me out of the water the other day was that it's a 20% reduction in hospitalizations just from
Brilliant.
healthy homes. It's
Brilliant.
such a simple thing. It feels like a simple thing that's had such a huge impact. We need more like
Well, you see, now that Healthy Homes was actually brought in, I want to say 10, 15 years ago, and it was taken out by the national government. And there were a lot of people at the time who were saying, this is just, well, look, you know what, I used to live in a house in Hamilton East, and, the walls just used to be dripping
Yeah.
in, condensation, and it can't be healthy. It just
No,
can't
it's
be.
not. No,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Wait, to get on to the last question. How did these dodgy candidates change things for the campaign?
I'm not sure they did, but I don't. I guess I might be proven wrong after the weekend, but I just think that there was over on this in the Cambridge side. I think there was more noise about the bridge. There was more noise about traffic, and that the right wing Voices for Freedom people, I don't think got a leg in. Over in Te Awamutu, I think that potentially they did, but there isn't the same angst over there. Other than the Memorial Park, I'm not sure that there's the same angst. And I think the thing about Te Awamutu is everyone in Te Awamutu knows who these right wing wacky people are, and they probably won't get in.
It'll be interesting.
I don't think they've changed the election at all. I will be very surprised. I mean, I think you'll find, people like Lou Brown. He'll get back in again because everyone knows him at the RSA, and he does wonderful things, and that's unlikely to change. Marcus Gower is really well known down the south. I don't even think he's run a campaign. He doesn't need to. He just needs to put his name up. And I think what's going to be interesting in Te Awamutu is the new community board. Now, if you want fireworks, that's where it's going to be happening.
Yeah,
it's not going to be happening around the council table.
It's one of the things I've noticed that there are sort of groups of Voices for Freedom trying for community boards specifically. I think it's Central Otago, Southern Otago. They've got 8 Voices for Freedom candidates running for community boards. It's sort of overwhelming. It doesn't seem to be quite so bad in Waipa.
Well, what's happened, of course, that the community boards, this is why this is fascinating. So last year we got a bit of a whisper that the council was trying to get rid of community boards, and they were, because they felt that they were useless, waste of time and money. So we, in fact, did a series of stories about, let's save the community boards, blah, blah, blah. Both Roy and I say to each other now, God, did we do the right thing after all? But so there's been a sort of a reset of the community boards, and they're going to be given more opportunity to be involved in some of the decision making. And so I guess that's why in Te Awamutu in particular, there's a lot more interest in the community board. So, Kane Titchener, for example, who we all know, he's the only one. Nobody stood against him, so we know he's back. So we know that his platform is anti-fluoride, and that he's going to continue that way. And there's some other issues that he's particularly concerned about. So
he's former New Conservative, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. So if he gets a couple of his supporters in as well, then you're going to have to keep your eye on the Te Awamutu Community Board. But really, I mean, the really big decisions are made at the council. The decisions at the community board are, whether you put the footpath in Sloane Street or whether you put it in, somewhere else, the other street, and where the grants go to. So, yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. The other issue we've got, of course, is earlier this year, one of our district councils councillors had to resign. We revealed she had an illegal quarry. She and her family were operating an illegal quarry on the banks of the Waikato River. And as a result of our investigation, she had to resign. So we'll be getting a new councillor out at Maungatautari as well. So there will be some new faces around the table. Not many. It'll be more of the same, I suspect.
I think the
The
low voter
interesting thing
turnout means
about
something at
both
state as well.
Susan O'Regan and Chris Woodhams is neither of them are standing for council. I think if Chris Woodhams had stood for council, he would have got on. And Susan O'Regan said, "Look, it's all or nothing now. I've been here for 6 years. I want to be mayor. That's what I want to be." And of course, Jim's only standing for mayor as well. Yeah. Bernard Westerbahn's standing for everything.
Oh yeah, mayor. I saw that.
Yeah, mayor, councillor, community board. So it'll be interesting to see, whether he gets onto any of them.
Well, he's Kihi Awamutu, isn't he? So it's a possibility.
Kihi Awamutu, yeah.
Yeah. They're an interesting community.
Kiki?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, that's not a bad community. I mean,
no, not at all.
It's the speedway and the polo grounds and everything, and it's if I was going to live anywhere else, potentially it could be Kiki.
Okay, that makes sense. And for me, it was always the place that you go to before you avoid Waikeria and what's the other one? Tokanui. Mad and the Bad.
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of ex-staff people who from Tokanui who live in Kiki. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. It's so close to
it. So if you're asking for any predictions, I'm sorry, Paul. I'm not good at predictions.
That's neither am I. I wouldn't risk it this year either. It's just low. But I guess
if you were to press me, I might even say that I think Jim Milquist will probably slide back in because of the nature of this community of Waipa. And I'm not going to say whether that's a good or a bad thing. Better the devil you know. He's been there 9 years. He's been in local authority for 30 years. I just have this feeling in my bones that he might just sneak in.
Worst comes to worst, that means that Susan will be free to take over Hamilton East when David Bennett steps down.
Yes, well, I've had that conversation with her, and she's not saying anything, but that wouldn't surprise me. And I tell you what, she'd be a formidable member of Parliament too. She's a very, very bright woman. She, obviously she's a farmer as well, and her farm has won several awards, and she's got young children as well.
And National Party needs to put her up again instead of bloody Barbara Kuriga then. A farmer who actually knows what they're doing.
She was asked, I did an interview with Susan a couple of years ago, and I think she said to me at the time she was sounded out back then when that seat came up. But, look, if she misses out on mayor, then perhaps Hamilton East, who knows? And Chris Woodhams, it's just going to be really, really interesting. So if Chris gets in, we're in for a really good ride for the next 3 years because he knows that I'm not going to be sitting back letting him get away with much.
That's good. That's the whole point of the press. You shouldn't let them get away with anything.
Yeah, and what they also need to realise about me and Roy to a lesser degree is we actually read the agendas. Not only do we read the agendas, but we understand them.
Yes.
And so when we read an annual report, which I did last week, and we read an annual report and we find out that in fact they've got three organisations suing them for $8.5 million. That's sitting on the books. And that the CEO's had a $30,000 pay rise. We know where to find those sort of things. And we understand them. But you're quite right, there's not a lot around these days that do. And is that good or is that bad? I don't know.
Oh, I do. It's definitely bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I come from a family of journalists, and we're all very much the same. So
Good sort of family to